capital presentation. I'm gonna hand it over to our city manager.
Thank you, Mayor. As part of I'm calling it our workshop series. I had met with Drew. He'd been introduced through one of another department within Capital or Government Capitals, Stephanie. So the city has worked with in the past, and I've worked with them at the county. We also discussed some things at our TML conference, and Councilor Nance was there. So I asked if he could do a presentation to council. The reason why I think it's important is to kind of understand, we talk big projects, we talk big equipment, really hard to come up with the big money. So what he is going to do today is he is going to kind of walk through a presentation on what type of opportunities we have with other sources of funding. We're talking about bonds, debt, that kind of thing. I did kind of give him a little prep on what we're looking at so far. Because every meeting we've had, we've talked about infrastructure, we talked about equipment. So I kind of said, these are things we're looking at. What's the easiest way to go after them? So I'm gonna let him do his presentation. This also helps prepare us for if we go into our budget, as well as looking at certificates of obligation down the road.
Okay, and for our YouTube recording, please just state your name and organization, and then we're excited to hear what you have to say.
For sure. So, I've been trying to get a habit of timing myself just so I don't go too long,
Okay.
long-winded. My dad's a pastor, so I'm used to talk. Anyways, so Drew Whittington, Government Capital Securities. So I think, did I just answer the first question about the who and the what? Okay,
Yes.
good. I was like, wait, did I answer that earlier? Okay, great. So, okay, so what I'm gonna do, kind of give you an overview of who we are. I'm gonna kind of do, I'll tell you this, about who Government Capital is. And then I'll go into funding options. So that way you actually know, like, why am I capable, or why am I able to talk about, or qualified, if you will, talk about financing, but kind of give you that. So this is really more there's no sales pitch. It's just literally just information. So please understand, like, this is a conversation. So feel free to stop me if you have any questions. I'll try to keep it light because I know it can get boring. It's like watching paint dry, you know, it's just like, wow, can we just get through it and get done? Or confirmation hearing, depending upon everything. But with that being said, that was a joke. Thank you. Okay, so I'll tell you a couple of quick things about what you have in front of you. Here you go. So I'll walk you through it. So on the bottom, you have a really cool coaster. It's a leather coaster. It also makes like a frisbee, so you can throw it at people. And if they're not paying attention, and it doesn't hurt like workers' comp, but it'll wake them up. It's like a frisbee. Okay, so you got a leather coaster, and then you got a notepad, and it's because we're money. And if you write on this notepad, money comes out. I'm kidding, not really. And then there's a dollar squishy. If you squish it really hard, money comes out. Just kidding, not really at all. And then this is so because we're financing, those are $100 mints. So it's like cool money, like we mint the money for you, bring them into you. And then these are Smarties, or actually smart money. So it's smart to work with us. So, and then my cell phone number is on the front of that card. So if in your other jobs, whatever they may be, if there's someone that walks in the door you don't want to talk to, you can call my cell phone. We will talk until they leave. And I help you out with that. We can have to talk about business. We can talk about how bad the Cowboys were again this year. And unless you're a Texans fans, we won't talk about that. So, okay, so that's who we are. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand these out. This is kind of good. This is about Government Capital as a whole. And there you go. There you go. We only want for each of these people. Okay. Do y'all too. There we go. All right. So we were founded in 1992. By the way, at the very end, I'm going to ask 2 questions. And whoever gets the questions gets a long neck water bottle holder. Otherwise, it was a beer koozie. So anyways, with that being said, we were founded in 1992. We did over $6 billion worth of financing. 1992 was a very significant year in music as well. It was a year that Achy Breaky Heart came out, or Baby Got Back, depending upon your upbringing, depends on what song is in your head. But that's what we do. We've done all over the nation, everything from the county of Hawaii to City of Alpine, Texas, all the way to Susquehanna, New York. You name it, we've done work, whether it be emergency service districts, cities, counties. So in other words, any local entity who we worked with. Funny quick story, you know, when you're a brand new business and you're starting out, you're just trying to find something with a pulse to bring in profit, right? We did a financing for a Indian tribe in Oklahoma for a herd of buffalo because they're personal property. So we did it. Payment came up to date and they didn't make their payment. We called them up like, hey, what's the story? And they're like, yeah, we're not making that payment. Like, wait, what? Well, because, you know, we are gonna make the payment. We signed a contract, doesn't matter. They're like, we're like, well, I mean, regretfully, we're gonna have to like pursue legal matters. They're like, cool, we're a sovereign nation. Sue us in our courts with our people. And we're like, you know what? You'll have those buffalo. So I'm pretty sure there's a herd of buffalo with our elk logo on the back of them, but I'm just joking. But anyways, so all types of financing, everything from police cars to backhoes to water sewer infrastructure all across the nation. With that being said, this thing that I just gave you on the bottom section is the equipment financing. And for y'all, I think we did a aerators or what was something. We did some financing a few years ago for equipment style. I think it was like 2014 was the last one, if I remember right. So everything from equipment, whether it be police cars to backhoes, water meter projects, anything that you can think of that can be removed, unbolted, driven away, used as a crane to take away, think HVAC on top of a building. And then also Economic Development Corporation type financing. Y'all have a ADC?
No, nice.
Okay, so I will tell you this. I'm gonna take a real quick diversion over here. Economic Development Corporations are phenomenal. They have a type A, that's for industrial job creation. Type B is for more public use, and those are only out to your city limits. What's interesting is a lot of cities are going to municipal development district, actually goes out to your ETJ. That's the difference between an Economic Development Corporation and municipal development district is where they finish. Here's the reason why it's good for your ETJ is y'all's ETJ different from your city limits?
Yes.
Much, yeah, okay, good. So here's the thing, if you have someone that lives in city limits, they order Amazon, you get the sales tax, right? But if they're out in your ETJ and the Economic Development Corporation only goes to your city limits, they're gone. But if you have an economic or a municipal development district, it actually goes out to your ETJ. Let's say if they order $300 worth of Amazon, you're gonna get roughly, you know, $30 maybe or so out of that. So just think about that as far as, and also the laws that govern those, plus the projects they can do is really, really open-ended. So those are really phenomenal. It does take a proposition to do, but it's just anything. I love talking about them. So if you ever want me to do more conversation, I can. So that's what the bottom side is, equipment financing. And then the top section is the municipal advisory solutions. So I was on the equipment side for 13 years and moved over to the bond side, the financial advisor side. And here's the reason that's important is whenever we come as a financial advisor, we have fiduciary duty to you, the city, to put your needs above our own, right? Just like the school district, you go out for a bond election, they have a financial advisor that helps. The neat thing about it is a financial advisor, we're not paid unless you actually have a bond. So from here, 10 years later, if y'all have a bond, that's when we get paid. Until then, it's basically pro bono. It's like a city attorney. You call the attorney, if y'all or any of y'all have personal attorneys or you're a business you work with has attorneys, as soon as they answer the phone call, they're starting the clock, right? We don't have that because we are there until you actually have an issuance. Question? No, yes, no, okay, all right. I thought you were getting ready to ask you a question. I was like, yes, my first question. Okay, so that kind of gives you an idea of who government capital is, and I just wanted to cover that because we're really unique in that aspect. And we have an equipment section company, and we have a bond section. So whenever your city manager comes to me and says, hey, here's the projects like we did here, then I can then say, okay, here are the different areas you could fund them. Okay, so with that being said, any questions on those two, that aspect? Yes, no? Shouts of anger?
So far, so good.
Well,
Let's
thank you.
continue.
Fantastic, okay. So with that being said, we're gonna move into, okay, I gave you the who government capital is, now we're gonna talk about, here, you know what, I'm just gonna let you pass this around.
Thank you.
Yeah, that would be much easier than me trying to hand them out. So this is not an It can be an exhausting list, but it's not an exhaustive list of funding options available in Texas cities and counties. You'll hear me go between cities and counties because the lending laws are similar for both of you. And then subsequently, with this being said, I'm gonna talk between financial advisor and municipal advisor. Please know the reason I say financial advisor and municipal advisor. You remember Dodd-Frank legislation way back in the 2009, 2010? Essentially, they came out and made a distinction for entities or financial advisors who service municipalities. That's why they call it municipal advisor. It's the same thing. Okay, so let's start here. We're gonna work from our bottom up. And I'm gonna cover those. Okay, so a tax anticipation note, we're gonna work from the bottom up. Tax anticipation note, that is a short-term financing. You'll notice it says 6 months to a year. And the reason being is you're saying, hey, listen, I have cash flow needs. So if you remember a few years ago, we had snow apocalypse, snow vid, whatever you want to call it. Remember when the whole state was basically a white blanket, and then electric bills came in and they were significant. Well, most cities say we didn't budget for that kind of dollar. We could pull the money out of fund balance, or you can do a tax anticipation note. And it's exactly what it sounds like, tax anticipation. It's a note that says, hey, listen, I'm anticipating my taxes revenues coming in and I'm gonna pay it with that. That's why it's limited to a year. So that's a tax anticipation note. It's one meeting, no voter approval, to the agenda posting, and that's it. They're not used very often, but they are used. Okay. Moving right along, the next two are the lease purchase agreement and public property finance contractual obligations. So we're gonna leave lease purchase agreement out, and the reason being is it's an archaic version of financing for personal property. What do I mean by that? Takes a lien on the asset, and you don't have a lot of ability to do a lot of different things with it. You can use it all across the United States, but that's not what we use in Texas predominantly. We use the Public Property Finance Act. So some of the things that y'all have discussed and that Ms. Megan shared with me that would fall underneath this is a skid steer, the motor grader attachment, the emulsion tank, even the water meters you could use. You could do those for that. And here's the reason why. The water meter, I can go pick up and remove, right? Go pull it out of the ground, I can remove it. It's not real property, it's not fixed via concrete, right? The skid steer, the motor grader attachment, the emulsion tank, those are all types of personal property. Now, here's the neat thing about those is it takes approval by the city council, agenda item, approval by city council, and then review by your city attorney. And we get you the contract, get it back. You're funded within 30 to 45 days, sometimes 60 days, depending upon where your city council meeting falls and where everybody is in that. And really, here's the neat thing about that is it doesn't matter if it's a fire truck, it doesn't matter if it's a police car, whatever your preference is, we can finance it. I don't care who you buy it from. One more step on that, especially because Megan was great. She sent me y'all's your policies, what was the word for it?
Financial policy.
Thank you, financial
Debt
policy.
policy.
Wow, fascinating word. I should have said that. Financing policy,
Which includes the debt policy.
which includes the debt policy. So here's the neat thing about that is whenever you go to purchase something, you all know this as city council, whenever you go to purchase something, you have to do the 3 bids, right? Unless you use a co-op. Co-op allows you to bypass the bid process because they've already done it through the co-op. With financing, there's no bid requirement. It's professional service, like your outside auditor, like your like engineers sometimes for that matter. You use who you want to use. And that's what the neat thing about this. In fact, if you go to any co-op, Fibor, HGAC, TIPS, missing one more, you won't find a financing character. You can't find that. Because again, AG said it's professional service. I have no asset, no widget. If you remember back in college, we call them widgets. There's no widgets to do. So that's what those is. The neat thing about that is you can go up to 20 years, obviously. Probably not going to finance a let's say an emulsion tank for 20 years. You may use it for 20 years, but you don't want to do that. Another example would be a ladder truck. Y'all have a fire department or is it volunteer?
Volunteer.
Okay, so but y'all can go with me there. Volunteer fire department, you've got a ladder truck that goes above 2 stories typically. Those are usually somewhere between well, nowadays they're between $1 million and $1.5 million. You're not going to finance that over 3 years because the useful life is much longer. You may finance it for 15 or 20 years. It's up to you. It's preference on yours. Number one. Number two, I don't care who you buy it from. I just need a quote to show what I'm doing. And then lastly, the term is what your preference is. It's not tied to the asset. So I'm not saying I'm financing this chair and this useful life is 3 years. That's all I was looking at. We usually look at what the warranty is, but at the same time, we're not tied to it. Does that make sense? Like I'm not tied to the 3 years. Ambulances are a good example. I was just talking to Jeff Davis County. They're looking at doing an ambulance and they have 2 and they're both really close to death. So they're wanting to get a new ambulance. The neat thing about an ambulance, I don't know if y'all know this. This is really cool. Something I learned is you got the chassis and you got the box, right? Because the box is what's really cost the most money because everything with the components within it. So you can actually take the box off and put it on a new chassis. So a lot of times what they do is they finance a new vehicle, a new chassis, come in and they just take the box off the old one, drop it on the new one. That's a really neat thing. So, but that one you can do it on multiple years. So any questions on that? Any equipment financing questions? So like I said, the skid steer, the motor grader attachment, the emulsion tank, the water meters, anything of those concepts we can do through an equipment financing. And that is the kind of, if you remember from the other thing, the police car, you're hiring government capital for that transaction, just that transaction alone. And please understand when I'm talking, I'm not saying this is just normal trends, market trends. I'm not saying this is what you have to do. I'm just giving you concepts and what happens for us. Okay. All right, let's move right along. So the next few, limited tax note, all the way up to the top, those are underneath more of the financial advisor side of things or municipal advisor. They're looked at as like a bond style financing. Okay, so again, equipment financing, you're hiring per transaction. Municipal advisor, you're hiring, hey, if we have a bond, we'll call you. We have some that we've been hired, but we've actually in the 5 years, 10 years, we've never financed anything through a bond. They haven't paid us $1, but whenever they do, they'll call us up if they need something. Town of Van Horn is a perfect example where they're a financial advisor. They haven't financed anything since 2011, if I remember correctly. So with that being said, let's go through limited tax note. Okay, so limited tax note is this. It's a limited bond. It's a funny name, limited tax note. Basically what it says is you're limited to 7 years. So you think it's more for small projects. So think, let's say you're gonna do, and forgive me, I don't know, what is the name of the street right here in front of us?
13.
13, okay. So you just want, hey, look, man, this is really bad. It's a lot of potholes. We just want to redo this one street. That's a small project, okay? It maybe quarter million, maybe, right? Right now, by the way, just FYI, to redo streets, it's about $1 million a mile. And it's actually now elevated up to that, just so you know. So with that being said, you do small projects, you can do roofs with it. It's anything for public use. That's what a limited tax note is for. The neat thing about that is it's one meeting, one agenda posting, and that's it. No voter approval, no, not going out to voters like a proposition, if you will. Just as simple as that. And that's what that is for. Limited tax note. It's typically for small projects. That's why it's limited to 7 years. I'll give you an example. We had a city up in the kind of towards the panhandle between Fort Worth and Amarillo. Texas DPS came in and said, hey, listen, we're going to redo this entire street, but your utilities are on this side. We want you to move them to this side. And they were like, okay. They're like, but we need you to pay for it. And they're like, 2.6 million. We don't have, oh, no, don't worry. It's going to be 100% reimbursement grant. They're like, okay, we don't have $2.6 million for this town of 1,600 people. So what we did is a limited tax note. We came in and said, okay, listen. Here's the thing, do you really need a 2.6 million right now?
calling the
We're like, you know what, no, we really just need.
be recorded for quality.
That was impressive. I was like, did I have that power to make a phone call while talking? With that being said, 1.25 million is what we ended up. They ended up taking that 1.25 because it's gonna be a reimbursement. So as they send money into the state, they'll get reimbursed. So their concept was, hey, we're gonna finance it over 7 years, but have the ability to pay it off at year 1. Does that make sense? And the fact that they're able to get those funds, hold on to those, make those payments so they weren't pulling any money out of fund balance. And within the time it took for the whole project, because we know the state, y'all, because who works for the school district? Someone works, you know, everything goes slow from the state, right? Everything is slow. So with that being said, we knew the state said it's gonna take 6 months, so we said it's gonna take 2. Oh, there. So that's a limited tax note. Any questions on that? So in the conversations with Megan about the limit, about y'all's projects. So one of the things I was going to tell you is you could
Hello?
use,
Yes,
Yeah, this is Jim Street. Was I talking to you
yes.
about that Zoom? Okay,
Just hold on 1 minute. Got him muted?
I muted him earlier too.
Oh.
click on the audio to unmute. And it says set up professional audio and audio settings. I'm not hearing anything. Do I click audio settings?
Trying to, I think you're us. aren't you?
He's on the phone too.
Okay, fine.
He's a local reporter.
Oh.
Okay, continue. I think we have it set.
okay, fantastic. And it's all good.
Good, thank you.
I'm married and I have 2 kids. I'm used to that. So I used to, it's all totally good. It's totally good.
Yeah.
One time I was in a meeting, and the dog started barking at the door, just, and it was like. Let's not hear that. It was hilarious. Okay, so with that being said, with the limited tax note. We talked about there was a crematorium, I think is what it was called. Yes, am I right on the name of that?
Yes.
Crematorium. Depending upon the dollar amount, you could use a crematorium. The limited tax note to pay for the crematorium. Again, it's kind of a dollar amount. What does that feel? If it's, y'all, literally have no idea what the cost is, so I'm just using those numbers. Hey, it's $1 million. We really don't want to go out and finance $1 million, but we could do a limited tax note for 7 years for $500,000. You see what I'm saying? So that's just an idea. Again, and then the line replacements, you'll have some line replacements that are on the horizon. You could also use it for that. Again, it's any public use. That's kind of the sticking point, if you will, for that. All right, so moving right along, any questions on that limited tax note? Okay, great. And by the way, one of the neat things about this is we can set it up to where you can pay it off at year 1. Anything, as long as we know ahead of time, we'll set it up that way for you. You see what I'm saying? So, or your financial advisor should be able to set it up for you that way. Okay, so moving right along, certificates of obligation, revenue bonds, and general obligation bonds. I'm going to go to revenue bonds and then come back to the last 2. Okay, a revenue bond is simply you're tying the revenue from a particular project to make your payment. Think wastewater treatment plant. Let's say you want to build a $10 million wastewater treatment plant. Please understand, I'm using that just dollar amount because I have another city that's looking to do the same thing, 10 million. You can say, hey, look, we're going to use this $10 million. Well, excuse me, this wastewater treatment plant. We're going to raise the rates on this and we're going to use it to make this payment. So in other words, the revenue bond says the money coming off of this project is going to be the sole way we're going to pay for this. Those bonds are typically higher due to the fact that you're tying it to the revenue and not to any lawfully available funds. So you can't technically raise your ad valorem taxes, you're raising your rates, right? So usually, hear what I'm saying, usually you tie that, you take the revenue bond, you do that plus something else. Certificate of obligation, for example, which we'll talk about in a minute. So I don't typically see it done by itself. You see it in conjunction with something else. But that's the best way to describe what a revenue bond is. Okay, moving right along. Certificate of obligation and general obligation bonds. So most. I'll put that in bunny ears or air quotes. Is most cities use a certificate of obligation versus a general obligation bond. It doesn't negate voter approval. It actually has that included. So a certificate of obligation is two meanings, and this is where it gets into craziness. Okay. So I'm just going to talk about the details of it, and then I'll kind of give you an idea of what it looks like as far as the outside strategy, if you will. So you have to have your first meeting in order the city council to vote to post notice. So what you're telling your constituents is, hey, listen, guys, we are going to do a water sewer infrastructure. The crematorium, line replacements, wastewater treatment plant improvements, any of those that we had talked, y'all have talked about. Our project is going to be, I'm just using these around $5 million, not to exceed $5 million for wastewater treatment plant improvements. Okay. That's your first meeting, and that is to tell the constituents, hey, we are posting notice to you, the constituents, that this is our intent. Post notice of intentions, essentially what you're doing. And then it goes in the local newspaper with the gentleman. And then it goes on your website. 45 days later, you had your second meeting and you're actually voting to approve it. First meeting is saying, hey, this is what our intent is. Second meeting is we're doing it. With the certificate of obligation, if 5% or more of your registered or your voters sign a petition, then it forces it to vote. So it doesn't technically stop the certificate of obligation. It says, okay, you got 5% of people saying, we publicly want to vote on this. It kicks it to a general obligation bond. So that's with the certificate of obligation. You can go up to 40 years technically, but the market says 30 years is about the max. So that's where you see on that 1, 2, 3 column, 5 to 25 years. You can actually go up to 30 years market. I just did that for the city of Lakeport, which is outside of Longview. Get this, y'all. The city, their address is in Longview, Texas. But it's the city hall of Lakeport, Texas, in Longview, Texas. That gives you an idea of the size of it. But they needed a new city hall. So we did a $3 million certificate of obligation for a city hall on a 30-year term. So with that being said, most of the cities and counties choose to go through a certificate of obligation. So a few years ago, city of Amarillo tried to do a certificate of obligation for over $200 million for a convention center. They did everything legally. Okay, they post notice that they did that. They didn't go out to the voters for approval for an election. They did it through a certificate of obligation. It got out in the press. A lot of craziness happened. So that's when the legislation came back and said, okay, listen, you can't do it for convention center, or you can't do it for a community center, or public, or like a for-profit place. In other words, they had to kind of like break it down to that. Thankfully, the legislation was altered throughout it, because at one point they were going to say no to COs completely. And TML, along with the TCMA, which is the Texas City Managers Association, said, whoa. Like, that's crazy talk. There are things that, for example, I'm sure, especially at Sul Ross, you talk to the college kids, when they flush their toilet, do they have any idea what happens from that point on?
No,
No clue.
oh, sorry.
Say what?
No, I just thought I said it loud. I said no.
Yeah, right. And I mean, but most people don't. They don't realize how much work goes into from the city perspective. I was supposed to have lunch last Thursday, no, 2 Thursdays ago, with a city near Rome, Texas, near Rome. And that's when DFW had snow, and it was they were broadcasting like ice, snow, the whole 9 yards. Everything's going to hell in a handbasket style, apocalyptic snow. And I was supposed to have lunch with this city administration. I called them. I was like, hey, are we still up for lunch? If you need to reschedule because your life is about to go crazy this Thursday, I'm okay with that. Like, And they responded, yes, please. We know that we're gonna be running like chickens with our heads cut off that day. So anyways, with that being said,
So we have 30 minutes remaining.
yep, I got 2 more and I'm done. So certificate of obligation is used for that. Any public use is typically what it's for. With that being said, again, back to some of the projects that y'all have. You can technically do any equipment financing in that. So you can pull your equipment into that if you want to. Crematorium, wastewater treatment plant improvements, and then line replacements are all vehicles in order to do the funding for those projects. Technically, you can use them. You may not want to, maybe the dollar amount's too small, too big, you want to pull them apart, but you can use it for those. Lastly, general obligation bond. Max of 40 years, you're going out to the voters for approval. Does anybody know what the 2 months are for general obligation bond elections?
May, November?
Boom, good job, well done. You
Look
get up
at
here,
you.
you get up here,
All right, I get up here.
or a long neck water bottle holder, since we're here. And by the way, there's a pen in there, and if you use that government capital pen to write on that government capital notepad, money comes out, just
Yes.
not true at all, not true at all.
We all need one of those.
Yeah, you're like, wait a minute, where's mine? So with that being said, a general obligation bond, it's a, you're going out to the voters, hey, yay, nay. Most of the time you see cities doing this if it's a really large project. Like a large project where you're gonna have that major tax increase. Here's the stickler on that. If the voters vote no for a general obligation bond, then that particular proposition cannot be done by a certificate of obligation for 3 full years. So you have a moratorium on that project using a CO for 3 full years. So that's one of those things that you, the city staff and the city council, know your people better. So it's okay. If this is something that we really want, and we think the city would be good for it, let's go out and do it. I've had cities where they say, you know what? Man, the school district, they just went out and did some, like 2 years in a row, did killer bonds. People are not gonna have, it doesn't matter if we're saying, hey, everybody gets new streets. They're just not gonna vote for it. So we'll go the route of certificate of obligation. My only suggestion to that would be make sure you're transparent with your voters. Bring in the newspaper, bring in some Karens, some nosy rosies, some meddling Monas. I know y'all, City of Alpine has none of those Karens, or meddling Monas or nosy, right? Y'all have no Karens? Yes, no,
No, we have no Karens.
no Karens. Okay, good.
No.
Or nosy rosies, meddling Monas. Yeah, no. Wait, y'all look at each other. Wait, are y'all saying no? That's okay. With that being said, that's a general obligation bond. And really, you can technically use it for any of the things that we mentioned. But typically what you're saying is, hey, we want the voter input on it. So that's really what those are. I would say one other aspect to the certificate of obligation, I would tell you, versus the certificate of obligation, is general obligation bond versus certificate of obligation bond is simply this, is being transparent with people, showing them what you're doing, because most people are good. Certificate of obligation, you're able to raise taxes, general obligation, you're able to raise taxes. Okay, so questions, comments, shots of anger, throw something at me, whatever.
I had one
Yes, sir,
question.
please.
Interest rates,
Yeah.
do they vary between all these and what are they at, say, this day and age compared to 10 years ago?
It's 0%. We actually pay you to take our money. I'm kidding. Wait, it's not being recorded, is it? No, I'm
Yes, it
kidding. I
is.
know. I'm just playing. No, actually, so the answer to that is because the market was so amazing in your after Dodd-Frank, everything in the market went crazy. Let's put it more recent than that. 2020, 22, that time frame, the market was just insane rates. In fact, we had some that were in the ones. Actually, we had some that were even sub 1. Yeah, right. That look right there, like, who, what? Yeah, it was crazy. And we had banks fighting to get lower rates. So here's the thing about it. As a financial advisor, we don't get anything off of getting you a better interest rate or higher. Our job actually, as a fiduciary duty, is get you the best rate out there. A, B, it's actually better incumbent on us to find out what the best methodology is for you. Back to the whole thing of that. And that's what sets us apart from other financial advisors, is we have both sides, so we're gonna say, okay, what is the best way for this? Because I'll tell you this. Certificate of obligation, great. I have a city that went and did a fire truck, and that's why I was using it earlier. They bought a fire truck using a certificate of obligation for $300,000. They paid $30,000 of fees through a certificate of obligation. That's insane for 300,000, right? Now, their interest rate was pretty good, but if you take that and you add it back into the interest rate for a true interest cost, it's through the roof. And the reason is that their financial advisor looked at everything from a bond perspective. Yeah, here you go. We could have done a public property finance side for way less than that and no fees and got it done for them. And they didn't have to go to the AG, and they didn't have to pay bond bills, and they didn't have to, the list goes on. To answer the question that you originally asked was, if you look at the 10-year treasury, that's the best barometer of where interest rates are for the municipalities. The reason is we use a 10-year treasury is that is the least market active compared to your property.
Is that
So,
4.6 or something now, or?
right, exactly. So when you're looking at the 10-year treasury, that's the best barometer. Now, obviously, to answer the question even deeper, is there's 4 drivers to the interest rate, current market, and we just heard from Trump yesterday. Yeah, everything's flying together.
A while ago.
Is he said, hey, listen, we're gonna unleash it. So now the question is, does that mean that the money that's buying tax exempt paper rates, is that gonna be moving into the commercial market, the private sector? If that does, we could see an inverse of interest rates because there's no demand for that supply. Then you follow it up with current market, credit of the issuer, we get the last 3 years audits, and that's anybody gets 3 years audits, current budget. The third is the term. That 3-year financing for a police car, it's gonna have a much lower interest rate than a 25-year certificate of obligation, right? And then fourth is the dollar amount. A $30,000 police car have a much higher interest rate than a $3 to $5 million certificate of obligation. Economies of scale. To bring it back around, you're right. 10-year treasury, you're in the 4s, maybe 5. What it is.
Do you go by the daily rate or do you go by their long-term rate?
Long term.
So it's 4.26 right?
We actually have one of the guys in our office tracks it. So whenever someone has, hey, what are they going? And I can send it to it and show you what the curve is.
You can get an email from them with all of their.
Yep.
daily
Oh,
rates.
there you go. So usually that's, I'll give you an example, is we have a city, if you know where down Berkeley is, which is outside of Abilene. What ended up happening, they were gonna do a refinancing of their bonds. And how are we doing? Yeah, 20.
We'll be there about 20 minutes.
I like it. So with that being said, we were gonna do a refinancing on their debt. So you and I would call it refinancing it, they call it refunding, because you're refunding the people who own your debt and then going out and buying it, getting someone new to buy your debt. That's why I call it refunding. You and I, common knowledge, refinancing. 10-year the rates had just dropped, or sorry, had just gone up. So we called the mayor and said, hey, listen, city staff, hey, listen, we're scheduled for Tuesday to vote on this. If y'all want, we can hold off a week and see what happens before we go to refinance it, because once you do it, you're locked in. And they said, you know what, let's wait, because that was gonna eat up their savings by a 20 basis point increase. So that's what we did. So that's coming up on us for y'all.
So you talked rates and answered his question. What about fees associated with each of these?
Yeah, so we do it out of the goodness of our heart.
Yeah. Sure you do.
Okay, truth be known, so in our municipal advisory agreement, we have our fees laid out from 0 to 30 million plus. As the dollar amount that you're borrowing, it tells you what our fee is. So it's all laid out. So from here on infinitum, you know what our rates are going to, our fees are going to be. And those are paid on top of the funding. So if you're going to borrow $1 million, you know, it'd be our fees would be 15,000.
So it doesn't matter which of the 7 approaches we're taking, your fee structure is the same.
Correct.
For each of the 7.
How do we get a copy of that?
I have it.
Okay.
And it's part of the agreement. So we don't have an agreement with them, but we do have the current bond counsel and the financial advisor on our current debt. And so tonight was just to discuss
Yes.
and then as we move forward. Because like I said, there are others out there,
Right.
but I wanted,
You have that though?
Yes.
To look at?
Yes. Email to Megan here.
Oh, okay.
yeah,
There you
but it was for
One copy.
discussion.
Yeah,
I didn't
again,
want
that's why I didn't
Right.
bring it up, but, just in case y'all wanted to know, to answer your question, it's in there.
And it's
Go ahead.
quite not the same, what the city has on the financial side where we did the, kind of the lease agreement kind of route with,
Equipment financing.
yeah, equipment financing, so the fees don't apply the same.
Correct.
And so we went with them and it was actually for our HVAC system
That's what
for
it was.
the police department.
Thank you.
And so then I also want to point out, the equipment financing, that comes out of our M and O. So we actually just budgeted our payment every year through our operating costs. So the line item in the police department had specifically, HVAC. And every year we budgeted that payment. So there wasn't going out for debt, it was coming out of our actual revenues. You have to obviously make sure it's within the budget.
Mr. Stevens, to go back to the comment from your thing, not all 7 fall underneath that one maintenance point. The Public Property Finance Act and the lease purchase are underneath our sister company, Government Capital Corporation up there. The other 5 are underneath myself. But what's neat about it is, with that being said, and this is whether the current financial advisor, it's any financial advisor, period. Within that agreement, it does 3 basic things. Number 1, it shows you what my fees are. Number 2, it says I have a fiduciary duty to you to put your needs above my own, and I have a duty of loyalty to make sure I'm doing it the best of my abilities. And then thirdly, it says if I'm not doing my job, you have a 30-day written notice to fire me. And they're typically, what they say is this is a 1-year contract that automatically renews unless either party says no. And that's what anybody.
When we went out for the water development project, we did submit for a possible new bond council or finance.
Financial
advisor.
advisor.
It was
Yeah.
both.
Yeah, and bond counsel, by the way, is a fancy way of saying a bond attorney. So at the school district, whenever you do a bond, you have a bond attorney. You got, I think in the school district, I feel like you have 45 different attorneys between SPED, between regular general counsel or bond, it's crazy.
And also taking into consideration as we go into our budget process and long-term goals, it can be a combination of.
Yes.
So the city did just pay off their CO. We still have a general obligation bond that we have a few more years on. And then we have a loan from the Texas Water Development Board. And that's a 0 interest one. That one's the Water Development Board is the longest one left. Other than that, we don't have any debt left. We've paid off a huge portion of it. But we could do the equipment purchase under one and then a certificate of obligation for the larger items. Some of the things that are coming up are, unfortunately, we do need to look at replacing our crematorium. We do have, service lines are gonna need to be relocated or replaced. So I just wanted y'all to kind of have that broad overview of all of our options, because it's not just like voter approval debt. There's some financing options. And you're coming up on a demo for a new zipper.
Yes, that's true.
So
Yeah,
that's
that's all
equipment.
zipper. That's all zipper. I can tell you a funny story real quick on that. I have a city. We'll call it. Well, for y'all, it's not West Texas. For me in DFW, it is West Texas. But anyways, we'll call it Central Texas. They kept, the city administrator did not know this, but the street guys kept calling out that company. Hey, can you come do a demo? Can you come? They ended up doing like 4 streets for them. I was administrator. Administrator was like, y'all need to stop this. We either buy or we don't buy, but they're not doing any more demos. They're really nice.
Fortunately, they're not gonna come out here that often because
Yeah.
it is a distance.
All right, Councilmember Martinez.
So these option can be to build a new city chamber?
New City Hall, yes.
Yeah.
3 million.
Councilmember Escobedo.
Okay. After the zipper thing, I think we just hold it first.
You look like you got a question.
Well,
Councilman.
I've always got questions.
I love it.
I'm just an old business guy.
I love
So trying to understand the various utilizations, essentially. The business that you're in, you're really worrying about repayments through INS. the business, your other business really focuses on the M and O side.
Yes.
That's really the difference between the
Yes.
two. And they're structured accordingly.
And here's the reason why, is most fund companies, the financial advisors, they look at everything from strictly INS.
Mhm.
We have the ability to look at both.
Yeah.
I mean, they technically all do, sorry, but we have the ability to look at both.
Yeah.
And to say, okay, what is it that really fits your need? And that as a financial advisor, as I'm standing here in front of y'all,
Mhm.
is if I was to be, again, please understand, this is not a sales pitch. Please, I just wanted to give y'all information.
Mhm.
I would then come to y'all side of the table to help. What is the best thing to do? I have a city that is literally doing that. Starting tonight, they're saying, hey, okay, here are all of our projects. Here's our capital improvement plan. Drew, you tell us how to do it. And what funding options we need to go ahead and move through. So that way, instead of all the, like we were talking about earlier, instead of the talk, we're actually putting, the shoe leather to the pavement and making it work.
So talk a little bit about where cities are from a debt ratio perspective.
Yes, sir.
You know, Megan showed up before I did, but I've been probably around the longest from a city council standpoint. We had a fair amount of debt, worked really hard to get it down.
Mhm.
My bias tends to be councils want to borrow money, and then you end up putting a lot of money out there that you could put to work in the city. The reality is, I'm also a business guy, so if you're gonna grow, you gotta be able to have capital to work with. What are you seeing relative to cities of our size? We're a $17 million city a year. What are you seeing in terms of debt that cities are typically holding on to?
Great question. So one of the things, I'm gonna answer it with two different.
Yeah.
Thought processes, is number one, I have a city who, city administrator came in. The smaller school city than y'all, but same concept, came in and said, you know what? I want to pay, Dave Ramsey, right?
Yes.
I'm gonna go Dave Ramsey on the city. Well, what ended up happening is they paid off all their debt. Now their INS is zero.
Right.
And now they have a $10 million wastewater treatment. They also have, City Hall needs to be, there's like multiple projects within the next 24 months that they're gonna have to take care of it. So now they went from having zero, now they're gonna have to go back up. So the best way on that aspect to answer your question is, it's always good to have some INS tax rate going.
I got all that. I'm just looking for what are you seeing ratio wise?
Yeah, exactly. So there's always good to have that, and because of the projects. And when we're coming in, typically what we do, and I have a city, or excuse me, a county just south of San Antonio. When it was like, hey, look, we're looking at these projects, show us what it would look like. So what I ended up doing is showing them what that tax increase would do to the typical property owner. So that way they could see in their city, their area was like, I did $50,000, $75,000, $100,000 and $150,000 property. And what that tax increase would do over a full year, to show them what that would look like. One step further than that, y'all are also regulated by the state to have lower tax rates. The answer to your question is, I would say a good barometer is about 20 to 30%. Just saying, okay, look, this is what our projects are. So you're right. We have to do some projects, and as a city, every city I talk to has street problems. Every city I talk to has water sewer infrastructure problems. I was in Van Horn, and half the city, 3/4 of the city couldn't use water fully because they had 3 pipe breaks this morning. So that's a project for them as well. So I guess to answer your question, did I answer it?
So part of it, yes. If I
Okay.
think about the broader picture now, typical homeowner here in Alpine,
Mhm.
half their taxes go to the school.
Mhm.
25% goes to the city.
Mhm.
About 17% goes to the county.
Yes,
The
sir.
remainder goes to the hospital district.
Yes, sir.
Looking at that bigger picture now from a property owner standpoint, if I'm paying $6,000 in property tax, is that part of the discussion you look at to help us? Because frankly, we are not the biggest spender. And the other one of the spenders has got some huge challenges on their own.
Yes, sir.
So trying to think about how that ties together from a property owner standpoint, in my mind, is the biggest challenge we have.
So one of the things that I do for, if, again, remember, we've kind of moved away from the information aspect. But one of the things that I always do is when I come to a presentation to talk about potential debt, like this is us as a municipal advisor giving advice, because technically I can't give advice until I
Yeah.
am. But with that being said, one of the, I'm gonna use the term graphs I show, is what you are as City of Alpine compared to your local, your other, and then other cities that are similar in size to you that may not be local, okay? To show you what your tax rate is compared to A. B, I also take into effect of what your debt per capita is in those areas, so that you know, okay, this is what it looks like. For us, if we were to go out for a large project, this is where we are currently. And then the other thing I look at is, okay, what is your growth right now? Over what has it been for the last 5 years? Let's project the next 5 years, so you know what it's gonna look like in the future as far as that debt. is concerned. Does that help answer your
Yeah, that
question?
helps,
more? Okay, good.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but it also is gonna shift, so as our debt goes, if it goes up, our M&O availability will also kind of decrease as well.
Of course.
So there'll be a slight shift, so it may not necessarily be a huge increase in
Right.
taxes for the resident. It will just be an impact on the overall budget. But then instead of trying to budget the operating side of it, and
Yeah.
get the equipment,
It's a balance.
And forgive me, a lot of people see specifically on the school district. They have a separate M&O and they have a separate INS, sorry. With the city, it comes as one, then we bifurcate it with inside. So that's one aspect of it. And then to go one step further, that's where an economic development corporation, municipal development district is actually really important for the city because that's sales tax funds. And that actually helps do your projects that you may not want to do a bond for, which you can do using this other part of the city to fund.
Yeah, but we don't have an EDC.
Correct. I'm just saying future reference.
And in order to fund an EDC, we're gonna have to impact ourselves relative to the tax.
Correct.
We have
I'm
8
getting
minutes,
close.
8 minutes remaining. Councilmember Nance.
I guess if you can explain to the rest of us, why, the difference between M&O and INS and why it's important to hold the INS?
Great question. You're always gonna have projects that you can't pay out of fund balance.
That's all it is, yeah.
That's it.
That's,
It's
that
that
is the
simple.
reason.
well, I'm gonna throw another one in. State legislation is looking at trying to regulate our debt as well.
Yes.
Which means
100%.
we won't be able to do the projects.
So if you go one step further, being a school district, you know. State legislature is looking at the school district's M&O saying, how can we compress that even further? And by compressing it and trying to quote unquote, get the fat out. That ends up affecting how much you can do. And if you're property wealthy, that it's even more painful. So you take that and extrapolate it out. What's your next question?
Next question is, ties into back into the legislation and everything else. So if the city comes in and passes let's just say a general obligation bond, then the populace is saying, we're willing to accept $1 million for wastewater smart meters or something like that. At that point in time, the city we can only go up 3.5%, I think, on our property taxes year over year. Is that affected at all, or that bond is basically allowing the city to accrue that debt, increase those property taxes, but then still each year raise it 3.5%?
So, no. So, like I said, it shifts it. So say our property, we go out for the bond, so our INS rate's gonna go up. So the INS rate never fluctuates, it's always based on what we owe for the year. So it doesn't matter how much we go up or down, that's only affecting our M&O. INS will stay at whatever rate gets decided in that tax calculation worksheet.
So that's guaranteeing.
That is, we have to guarantee we're gonna pay back the debt. So that's automatically a fixed rate. It's the M&O, so there's a shift. We've done this, where this was INS and this was M&O, and we've switched it. So our debt has gone down significantly, so now we go back out for debt and you wanna balance the two out. So M&O is what's gonna be affected. Just because we go out for debt, doesn't mean we get an extra increase over that 3.5%. It
Not
just
like a school
means,
district. It's not like a school.
yeah,
district.
that just means that our INS is at fixed rate and our M&O is what we're fluctuating with the 3.5.
Gotcha.
With
So
that
that-
being said, one caveat, not caveat, one addition to that is because you'll have existing debt. One of the things that we do well is I call it feathering. I don't know if there's a real terminology for it. We wrap it maybe. So you say, okay, here's our payments for the next 5 years and we're paying off this particular bond, that general obligation bond. So what we'll do is we'll do light for the first 5 years on a new bond. And then pushed it further out. So technically, yes, you're paying more interest, but what that does is it allows your payments to be much more soft. throughout those few years. So that way you're not compressing the M and O so deep, so lousy. That's what I did with that Lakeport, that City Hall. Their bonds pay off in 2028, 2027. And so those first few years, we had a lower debt service for the new bonds.
And then I guess the final question I had is just, if this was a project like smart meters, does the city go out and actually get a estimated quote for the total cost of the project before you guys get brought in?
Yes. I hesitate, and the reason being is you bring us in whatever you want us to, right? But at the end of the day, the dollar amount's gonna drive what the interest rate and what the payment amount's gonna be. I can all day long and give you quotes and give you examples of it, but the water meters specifically, or the meters specifically, I hate that word. You never say it right the first time. Yeah, that's one of those ones is you go out to, again, back to the whole, you go out, find who you want to work with. As far as the water meters, and then you say, okay, give us the dollar amount.
You wanna know an amount ahead of time, so you don't over borrow or under borrow.
Exactly,
Because if we don't have, if we come and say, oh, I want 5 million, and we only needed 1.
right.
Does a revenue bond impact INS?
Yes, however, it's much more tied to your revenue source. So you're raising your rates for water
You
usage.
raise your rates, but I'm just talking about the whole challenge we're talking about is INS versus M and O.
It doesn't have as much of an impact on your ISS with for certificate of obligation to obligation.
So for some of our capital improvements, so water, wastewater,
It would be mostly utilities, and those usually come with. Well, there's a term. So like with the Texas Water Development Board, there are certain things we have to have in place in order to utilize our revenue. Because when we have bad years and the revenue doesn't meet it, but yes, it mainly utilities. I would never suggest or recommend council use it for, the general fund, for the general operations.
no, I'm not talking about GMO, but I'm talking about many of the things we're talking about
So-
are in fact
I-
our revenue-based systems, which I would think would be a higher priority.
Yeah, so
From
if
a
we were to
bond
go that
perspective.
route, what I would suggest is saying, we're gonna do a revenue bond, accompany it with a certificate of obligation. So it's like belts and suspenders.
Yeah,
We're gonna tie it to the revenue, but at the same time, we have the ability to raise ad valorem tax.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
yeah, oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Does the, I know in school districts, there's a cap on M and O and INS, I believe, the state puts in there.
Mhm.
Is there a cap on M and O and INS from a city's perspective?
There's a cap on the INS that's
INS.
it's set out, not only at the state level, but it's within our debt as well. That we will not exceed, I think, $2 per. I think it's 1,000 by the way, we do have a cap.
And where are we at
250.
on that cap?
Oh, we're nowhere, it's,
Yeah, close.
our M and O is 0.01.
Yeah.
Like we have, our debt payment for this year is $50,000.
10 years ago, different story.
Very different.
Okay, we have 2 minutes remaining. Anything else?
I'm done.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
I apologize, it went so long. I'm so
No,
sorry.
it's perfect.
Yeah.
It's perfect timing. You had an hour,
Hey, I
you
did
finished
right.
2 minutes early,
There you
lots
go.
of questions, so
That's
well
awesome.
done.
And I'm grateful. And if y'all have any questions, my phone number again is on there. If you want to do it.